Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, 20 years ago was more than just Metroid Prime's anniversary for me. It was a time in my life when I was finishing my final year in college. I was working two jobs, one in the bar in the evenings and the other in a small independent video game store. It was in the store where I met a group of now lifelong friends, where we played endless legendary battles on Street Fighter Alpha 3 against both ourselves and any customers brave enough to test their skills against the FGR elites, which we became known as. It was a time where we played countless hours of Fantasy Star Online into the wee hours of the morning, slaying numerous rag rappies and defeating dark fowls over and over again. Throwing stories of beauty shop Amazonian priestesses being blinded by laser pens, spending too much money on Snapple drinks, panel chocolates, and a monthly stash of much wanted traded in games which none of us could ever fully afford to buy. Plus then you got cardboard boxes and hatches, stories of which shall never be spoken of in public. And amongst other legendary moments, it was certainly a time of greatness. But as a Nintendo fan, this was both the hardest generation of defending Nintendo against the masses, as well as my personal most overzealous Nintendo fan era. At this time, there was almost nothing Nintendo was doing majorly wrong in my eyes with the GameCube and Game Boy Advance, but primarily the GameCube. To me, they had both the hardware and software that no gamer should have shied away from. But as we know, this wasn't the case in many people's eyes, and it certainly had me backed up like a wild dog in the corner sometimes, snarling and biting, defending my glorious big end against the ever-growing PlayStation and Xbox nations. At one time, to the point where it almost cost me my job. A funny story for another time for sure. At that time, we also lost Rareware to Microsoft, who seemed to be doing little with their new purchase on the original Xbox. Sega had also crumbled into a third-party company, something which, along with the loss of Rareware, had crushed my gaming soul into a dribbling wreck. But with the Xbox, Microsoft had found a new developer who could create, the next era of first-person shooter greatness in the form of Bungie, with Halo Combat Evolved, a launch title which deserves all the accolades it got. It's truly a legendary game that even I utterly love. But deep in my Nintendo heart, and with losing Rareware, with the likes of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, Nintendo had lost their first-person, first-party hold on the market, and we needed something that, in that genre, to say, Nintendo doesn't need Rareware to produce first-person greatness. So in comes Metroid Prime from Nintendo and Retro Studios. Metroid Prime being an IP I had played since Metroid 2 on the Game Boy and later to Super Metroid on the SNES. But unlike many other great Nintendo IPs, I had made the transition to 3D. Metroid had skipped the N64, but had now arrived on the Nintendo GameCube in a perspective that no one could have predicted would work so well for this IP. But up to this point, Nintendo had brought so many of its IPs successfully into 3D for the first time, so it's reason it's like why doubt them, now on such a thing. Being in the UK, we still got many new releases months after their initial Japanese and US releases, and me being crazy hyped for Metroid Prime, as well as wanting and the GameCube to dethrone that Halo 1 first-person lock on the market. I couldn't wait another 4 months for Prime to release in the UK, so I imported my US Platinum GameCube along with a US copy of Metroid Prime, both of which you can see here. I also ensured that when I was working in the store, and that video game store during the day, I'd bring my Platinum GameCube into the store with Metroid Prime and plug that bad boy into the CRT TV next to the counter for all to see what the GameCube was producing with what I personally class as gaming perfection. Metroid Prime was more than everything I wanted. It went into the realms of, this game feels beyond this generation. A level of craftsmanship, sound and detail that few to no other titles in their entirety can match at that time. Metroid Prime was not a first-person shooter like previous similar titles, probably in that genre. Titles such as like Exhumed, which I played on a Sega Saturn, and Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which I played on the N64. And if you know Retro Studios history, then many of the staff that worked on Turok games also made Metroid Prime. but Metroid Prime was classed as a first-person adventure, and a first-person adventure it was indeed. Sure, it had shooting in there. Your Samus Aran at the end of the day, the intergalactic bounty hunter traveling, through the stars and blowing up planets, in a beautiful, ever-changing gunship. But Metroid Prime's main aspect was exploration and investigation. Something which set it apart from the crowd, especially with its visors, its many visors. There was nothing, quite like the intro to Metroid Prime as well. Something in my very early YouTube days I'd done an entire focused video on. From tumbling asteroids, which could be interacted with, something I spent a lot of time playing around with, to now claustrophobic alien-inspired corridors upon a derelict space station, which after a dramatic end forces Samus to disembark and land on the planet below, which we now know as Talon 4. And this is where Metroid Prime truly kicks things open, I feel. Now freed from the confines of the space station, Samus is seemingly alone on an alien world, which will now force her to fully observe her environment for clues and where to go, what has happened and what she needs to be aware of. Metroid Prime forced the player to become intimate with their surroundings, to remember the placement of structures, natural and unnatural, for navigation, to observe the fauna and flora for knowledge and self-preservation, and finally for classic Metroid gameplay, to remember places you'd once been or are once out of reach due to Samus's initial limited capabilities, which increased in time. Movement was slow for Samus, both to emphasize the weight of her power suit, which developers ensured to add those extra heavy footsteps as Samus moved about, and also to keep the players in mind that you weren't meant to be running through these areas at high speed. Each area was a unique biome, rich in detail and atmosphere, which the developers wanted you to soak up, and soak it up we all did. And when it comes to environmental details and sound, the original Metroid Prime still even stands above the other Prime games when it comes to truly those little details that I absolutely loved. If you really poke and prod the Metroid Prime worlds, interaction level for a game of that era, you can see where they came from, because I used to poke and prod around the world of Turok, and you'd be surprised at those little details that those games reveal. Something I'd done in one of my N64 videos, where I showed some of the stuff in Turok 2, some of those little details that some people wouldn't even know that was in the game, yet the developers put them in there for those people who would look for and even notice those things. And the Prime series was just full of those, especially Prime 1, like I said, to the water, to the sky, to the environments, to the lighting. It was all just absolutely sublime, which really added to this game's atmosphere and its design, and me as a player being just utterly engaged. And this kind of leads me on to, somewhat the main topic of this video. Of late, and arguably since the game was announced, people have been worried about how Metroid Prime 4 will both look and run on a Nintendo Switch, a piece of hardware which for many now is showing its age, or arguably was showing its age from launch, as people were eager to highlight at that time and still continue to now. Through the system's life, personally for me, I've seen some truly wonderful looking games for this system, what this system's capabilities are, from the likes of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and we got the sequel, coming out soon. We've had ARMS, Super Mario Odyssey, Astral Chain, Luigi's Mansion 3, Splatoon 3, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Animal Crossing, the new Pokemon Snap, some stuff like Fast RMX and Bayonetta 3 as a recent one, just to name a few. And of course there have been some third-party impressive titles, like Alien Isolation, both Doom games, The Witcher 3, Monster Hunter Rise, which looks incredible, Nier Automata, Dragon Quest XI, etc. And of course we've had the recent sublime and utterly beautiful Metroid Dread. A game which, for me, has now cemented itself as the best side-scrolling Metroid game that I've played. Even better than the greatness that is Super Metroid, as well as Metroid Fusion and the stellar remake Metroid Zero Mission. As a piece of hardware, I personally consider the Switch to be a very capable machine, given the nature of the hardware itself. But there's also two defining thought processes I've had for as long as I can remember, since I've really paid attention to gaming. The first is always judging the output of a piece of hardware based off the hardware alone from a technical standpoint. What that hardware is capable of, what developers are capable of doing on that hardware. And we've seen enough examples now with the Nintendo Switch, where we have seen some truly stunning titles for what this piece of hardware can do. And the other major thing is for the games themselves, and probably the most constant in my mind every time I play a new game, and that's simply what came before and what is this new game doing now. So let me just say that again, what came before and what it is doing now. This mindset I have towards games is a scenario by scenario position. So in regards of Metroid Prime 4, the what came before and what is it doing now, cannot fully come into place because guess what? We've yet to see any footage of the game. But what came before is pretty easy, right? Because we know what came before, which are Metroid Prime, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and Metroid Prime 3 Corruption in terms of console Metroid Prime games. Those games released on the Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii, with Corruption, the last game coming out in 2007 on a sub-HD console, the Nintendo Wii. That was our last taste of a full Metroid Prime game on a home console. A home console which even at its time, the Nintendo Wii, was graphically not up to par with what the competition was pushing out on their respective machines, being the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. Yet have you seen Metroid Prime 3 Corruption on a Nintendo Wii and how great that game looks for that hardware? So two things here. What the Wii is producing is incredible for the machine and what that machine is capable of. Even though it's a souped up Nintendo GameCube, it pushes nicely beyond what we saw with Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes on the Nintendo GameCube. So for me, people, this is the target game which Metroid Prime 4 is competing against visually first and foremost. Not modern games like Doom Eternal, Alien Isolation, Call of Duty, Halo, etc. This is all about the last Metroid Prime game and the first time we'll see a Metroid Prime game in HD from Nintendo. So in my mind, Metroid Prime 4 needs to top, everything, for the most part, that Metroid Prime 3 delivered. But the big difference between the GameCube and the Wii is that this time we are 2 hardware generations apart, as Metroid skipped the Wii U and has now entered the Switch timeline, unless of course you're the believer that Metroid Prime 4 will skip the Nintendo Switch. which if it does, makes this argument even stronger. I personally have every faith that Metro Studios will not only deliver a top quality Metroid Prime game, as they have done 3 times in the past, but I fully believe that Metroid Prime 4 will wow my socks off graphically, just as Metroid Dread did, which, let me point out, was released on the same hardware at the same time as other incredible looking 2.5D games were out. Games such as Ori and Ori and the Will of the Wisp as quick examples when we're talking great looking 2.5D Metroidvania or Metroid type games. So as that other comparison with Metroid Dread, that was the first time we'd ever truly seen a Metroid game in HD, and it was everything I wanted and more. To think that I won't feel the same way about seeing Metroid Prime in HD for the first time, come on now, people. Come on. Prime 4 doesn't need to be open world like Breath of the Wild or action packed like Doom. Prime 4 needs to remember what the Prime series is all about, which is also now different from what the side-scrolling Metroid titles are about. Nintendo confirmed this a long time ago. The side-scrolling Metroids and the Prime Metroids are 2 different subs of the Metroid game genre now. They are offering 2 different playstyles. Prime is a slower paced exploration game where I look for more environmental details that immerse me into the world through interaction and sound than I do through intense platforming or high energy combat. Although those things, should be there in part, but like the other games, they should be for selected circumstances, the second part of the gameplay and not the first and foremost norm of the gameplay. And I previously done a video on what I feel Prime 4 should strive for, or at least what I'd love to see in Metroid Prime 4, so please check that out if you haven't. But anyway, to cut this off, merry birthday to Metroid Prime on the Nintendo GameCube. I utterly loved this game to the point where it's in my top 5 games ever. My top 5 games, just like anyone's top 5 games, are very personal games to me. And at least for me, there's certain standards, certain calibers that just have not been beaten. And in 20 years, Metroid Prime is still standing on top of that pedestal by itself. It's a truly incredible game that I still feel to this day that many other developers haven't touched, even on modern consoles. And I personally cannot wait for Metroid Prime 4, which I'm convinced will both look and play amazingly like a Metroid Prime title always has. So, yeah, as always, thanks for listening. Let me know your thoughts on Metroid Prime, the original, if you were there day one, around about the same time as I was, if you're only just playing it now, if whatever. Let's just talk Metroid Prime and some Metroid Prime 4. Celebrate, get hyped. But as always, I'll reply to every single one of you. Take care, everyone, and peace.